So, Jessica, why don't you tell us all what was the last thing that you did scared? Yes, Jessica, great question. The last thing I did scared was film this solo podcast episode. It's cheesy as hell. It's true, though.
Access denied. Access denied. Access denied.
Hey, y'all. It's your host, Jessica Jordan, and I'm here on Access Denied, the podcast dedicated to helping you get over your fear of rejection, one episode at a time. Let's go! Hey, y'all. I'm your host, Jessica Jordan Ping, and welcome to the Season 1 finale episode of Access Denied. Today, you get me. Just me. Raw, unfiltered, transparent, solo. Welcome to the chaos. I'm sure this episode is going to be interesting. I wanted to do this for two different reasons. Number one being, I wanted the season finale to be special in some capacity. I wanted it to stand out. I wanted it to both mark the end of season 1, but also get people hyped for season 2. And I just kept thinking, okay, who's the coolest guest that I can get on to the podcast? But the reality is, friends, I've had nothing but super epically cool people on this podcast, in my very humble opinion. I feel so freaking lucky for all of the amazing people that have shared their stories and shared their nuggets of wisdom with myself and you listeners throughout the whole season, that I was just like, how can I top this? How can I raise the bar? I don't know if this is raising the bar, but the only thing I could think of to make it different and unique would be for me to sit here and just yap with you for about 30 minutes. So that is ultimately what mostly inspired this. But I think the other number two thing that kind of came to my brain as I was thinking about how this season was going to unfold is how I really wanted to tell the story on here about how I got to starting Access Denied, this podcast, in the first place. And I think that this is a really good wrap up for season 1 because it talks about many of the themes that came up throughout the season, while also touching on something that I don't really feel has been touched on yet, which is this concept of doing things imperfectly. We talk a lot throughout the show about how we have to do things scared, right? That's one of the questions that I ask every single one of my guests near the end of the episode. What was the last thing you did scared? It's how I introed this episode in that really wildly cheesy way. But something we don't talk a lot about is the idea of doing things imperfectly and just simply getting started. And very much that has been my experience with content creation all the way through. Since becoming an adult, and especially working in the creative entertainment industry, I have realized that nobody, and I mean this so wholeheartedly, and I think this really expands beyond the entertainment industry as well. I think it could probably be said for most industries and most adults in general. Let me say this with my full chest now. Nobody knows what they're doing. Not a single person. Everybody's just kind of figuring it out as we go, winging it, hoping for the best. That's not to say that there's not strategy. That's not to say that there's not a plan. That's not to say that people are just truly out here throwing shit at the wall and hoping something sticks. It's to say that there's no roadmap for anything that we do in life. There are people that have done it and paved paths to make it easier for others and give us inspiration and motivation. But there's not a clearly defined path that fits for you and who you are uniquely as an individual. Everybody's lives, backgrounds, experiences, perspectives are different. And therefore, nobody knows what they're doing because nobody has lived this life before. And so that has brought me a lot of comfort, I would say, in every single step I have taken in my career. And in so many ways has been a guiding path forward. Because it's so difficult putting yourself out there publicly in the way that I do. And that's not me tooting my own horn or anything. It's just me being honest with you all. There's a lot of room for error on a very public stage. And I know I only have like a small following compared to lots of other content creators who are doing much bigger and much scarier public things. But it's also still very terrifying. And, something like this podcast, which sits so close next to the passions deepest in my heart, failing at something like this is scary, right? It's so scary. It would have been a massive blow. And so I just realized finally in June of this year that I couldn't just keep putting things off. I couldn't keep putting this dream of mine off. I had to leap. I had to do it imperfectly. And that's what this whole season has been about. And it's not something I've talked about publicly, but I've looked at this first season in many ways as an experimentation season. That's not to say I didn't take it seriously. That's not to say that I didn't put my best foot forward. That's not to say that I'm not proud of what I've created. And it's certainly not to say that anybody that's been on here should feel any less that they were chosen for the first season. If anything, they should be feeling so good that I thought that they were so amazing and important to me in my life that I wanted them on and part of this journey with me. This is the foundations of something that I am so excited about, so proud of. And I am so grateful to every single person who has walked this road with me over the last 3 to 4 months now since I launched. When did I launch? I launched September 3rd, and I'm recording this on December 2nd. So truly, I feel so beyond grateful to every single guest I've had, every single person that has followed the YouTube or the Spotify or my Instagram pages for this podcast, because it is so meaningful to me. Every single person that's been involved and listening and a part of this, you mean the world to me. So without further ado, let's talk about why this was so important to me and why I decided to do it imperfectly and what that whole process was like, right? I'm hoping that by the end of this, you maybe feel inspired to do something scared, do something imperfectly, and really take a positive risk in your life, because there is no reward without risk. 100%. 100%. And there are calculated risks, of course, but so do so cautiously. Don't put yourself in a really bad spot, but also it's important to chase the things that you desire in this world. So let's dive in, friends. If you don't know who I am, because I realized I don't think on this podcast I've ever really given a whole introduction into myself and my background. It's always been about the guests, and I love that, and that has been the goal. But I also realize that some of you may be listening and not be familiar with me and my story and might not follow my other page. The Rolling Explorer is how I got my start. It is a lifestyle blog about yours truly. I talk about my life as a disabled woman. And for everybody listening, I was born with my disability. It's a rare disease called child syndrome that affects one side of the body with skin and limb deficiencies. For me, that has manifested as a shortened limb difference on my left arm and a shortened leg on my left side as well, that I had a further amputation of when I was about 3 months old, I believe, so that I would be able to use a prosthetic to get around. Nowadays, I use both a wheelchair and a prosthetic with a walking stick to get about my life and do all the fun things that I have the privilege of doing and sharing with you all online every single day. So that's a little bit about who I am and my background. And I think the next important thing you need to know is that I have always been a performer. Being an entertainer just was who I was at my core growing up. It was always what I enjoyed doing the most. It's always what I dreamt of doing. I don't think there was ever a time where there was not some fire lit under my ass pushing me towards a life in entertainment. I think that there were moments that I told myself that I wanted to do other things. And I think that there are other passions that I have as well that are kind of lit alongside this brightest flame in many ways. But generally speaking, being on stage, being on camera, all of those things. That's where my passion truly lies. That's where I'm most excited and feel most free in many ways as well. I love being creative. I love performing. I love everything that comes alongside that. And I've been doing it properly since I was 3 years old. I trained as a dancer and started ballet classes at 3. I think in so many ways that showed me very early on, I am meant for dance. I am meant to perform. I am meant for the stage and all of that. I went on to do musical theater shows in my hometown. A big believer in community theater, and I did it for over a decade. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but over a decade while growing up, and even returned last summer when I moved back to the United States after my divorce, came back and immediately did a community theater show as a way to sort of ground myself and find myself again post-divorce, post-separation, all of that. And so that was really special as well. But the reason I'm sharing all of this is because I think it's important to see that I have this history, right, of being drawn to the entertainment space, being drawn to sharing stories in some capacity. And granted, through dance and through acting, those are fictional stories. But I've always, always, always believed in the power of storytelling. Always believed in the power of using your voice to change the world. And I truly think it stems all the way back to those early performances that I was doing. And so, as I grew up, I studied English literature in college. And that was something, again, that tied back to storytelling. And I figured out as I was in school that that's what I wanted to do. I'd always joked, but now in hindsight, I don't think it was ever a joke. I think it was very real. But I always joked with my teachers and stuff in high school. They would ask what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said, oh, well, I want to be the disabled Ellen or the disabled Oprah. I wanted to be a talk show host, but be the first one to ever have a visible disability. And I would say that loudly and proudly. But again, I would kind of be like, oh, ha, 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 that's not real. That's just what I say. But it was real. It was very much real. And it has been the driving force for me throughout my entire career. And I don't think I realized that until just a couple years ago. And let me explain. I brought on a content production assistant and PR manager. And so our first day working together, she and I sat down and she was like, so what are your long-term goals? And I immediately said the thing that I used to joke about all the time in high school. I said, I want to be the first visibly disabled Oprah and or Ellen. I want to have that level of reach. I want to have a talk show and I want to use storytelling to change the world. And she was like, okay, let's make it happen. And from that point forward, I started integrating more chatty videos into my content. I started integrating more long form content into my content. And it was still very strut and dance and silly trend video heavy, but it was starting to take these steps towards my long-term goal. And it was around this time that I crafted a video style and series that I have also sort of become more well-known for. My accessibility, wait for it, T-series. Yes, yes, yes. Spilling the accessibility. That is something that I have been doing for over 2 years now, which is wild. But, around the start of that, I think it became clear to both myself and Mary, who was the content production assistant, PR manager, guru. We both realized this could be an epic podcast format. And from that point forward, once we really started going, the goal was always podcast, because I think both of us realized that that was the stepping stone to talk show host. And so I continued with the series. And in many ways, it is a little mini podcast. Each episode is somewhere between a minute and 3 minutes. And I'm just sat there with this microphone. This microphone has been in my content now for quite a long time. I would sit there with a mug and I would talk about different things facing the disability community. However, this is where things get tricky, right? Because in the beginning stages of so many of those videos, sometimes I would share very short little anecdotes, but one, they were too short. A minute to 3 minutes, you really can't communicate any sort of story in that amount of time, not effectively. That was problem number one. Problem number two is that it wasn't storytelling. It was talking at people. It was educating. And that's not a bad thing. There's a place for that on the internet too. But I think I was convincing myself that because I was sat down talking, I was telling a story. And even with a little anecdote here and there, it wasn't storytelling. It was educating. It was two different things. It was not the goal. It was a stepping stone, but it was not the goal. The goal was to use storytelling to change the world. That's always been my goal. And to help people, to motivate people, to inspire people, to entertain people, to educate people. Using storytelling to do all of those things is very important to me and my core and my mission and what I strive to do in this world. And so, around all of this was when my divorce happened. There was a lot of things that ultimately got in my way that were out of my control at this point in time. I had to move. I had to feel my feelings. I couldn't be super transparent online because I was in the beginning stages of the divorce process. And so my dreams of starting this podcast were once again put on hold. And this time, again, for reasons that were not fully under my control. So flash forward to October of 2023, I moved to Chicago and I tell myself I'm going to dive all in on long form content and really try my hand at that. So once I can start talking more freely and opening up about my life again, I'll be ready for a podcast. And so that's what I did. I dove into YouTube. I made several videos, and it was just a way of practicing editing. It was a way of practicing seeing how people respond to long form content, how to do it, what I'm doing, what am I doing? I do a lot of things in experimental zones, right? I'm a big believer in numbers. I'm a big believer in research, and I just throw myself into projects sometimes. And just I'm like, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to see how it goes. And that's what I did. I did a month of YouTube videos. It was so much work. It was nutty bananas. And my goal was to kind of maintain that, not that wild of a posting schedule, but to maintain doing YouTube at least like once a week going forward after that. But I got in my own way at that moment. I did. I got in my own way because I started focusing on things that ultimately I shouldn't necessarily have been focused on at the time. I don't have regrets because I don't believe in regrets. I think that everything happens for a reason to some extent. I think that, everything is a learning lesson, and I can look back on this and appreciate it for what it was. I was distracting myself because the idea of putting myself out there and chasing my dreams was scary. It was scary. And also, wasn't it just easier to accept defeat before I even tried in some ways? But I started focusing on dating. Dating one person in particular. I was allowing myself to just bend over towards this lifestyle that this guy wanted because I was afraid of failing. I was on my own now too, folks. This is the first time that I'd been fully on my own. I was living alone. I was scared. I was scared of failing. And so I was just like, all right, I'm going to throw myself into this not relationship. It was never that serious, but throw myself into this guy that I really like and just see how that goes. Well, okay. So long story short, that didn't work out. And I realized how much I had given up on myself because I was just so insecure and scared. I was so freaking scared of failure. I was so freaking scared of the rejection, of not making it and not having success. And so I got in my own way. And it was about March that I was like, no, get back to yourself, girly. So I started making content way more vigorously. come that time of the year. And you know what? It has done nothing but pay off. I have had one of the most successful years of my entire life, and I feel so very grateful for that. I've had more opportunities this year that have come seemingly out of left field. I would have never in my wildest dreams ever, 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 ever expect that I would be at events surrounding the UN General Assembly. I never would have expected to have gotten invited to speak in New York City. I never would have been ever would have considered the idea of getting invited to the White House by the President of the United States. All of these things are because I got myself back on track, because I decided, you know what? Your dreams are too important. Your fear of failure, your fear of rejection, your fear of being told no is not stronger than the hope you have for something brilliant to come from you sharing your story on the internet. And so I had to recorrect. I had to course correct. And I did. And, you know, in this whole span of time, I was still dreaming about that podcast. I was still dreaming about a different medium, something else I can do to just bolster the work that I'm already doing online. And I was like, what can I do? What can I do? You know, I was in talks with another creator about doing a co-hosted show for a really long time. And ultimately, I backed out of that situation because I realized that that was another way of myself getting in my own way. It was my way of finding somebody else in a way to fail with. And that's not to say that our podcast, if we had continued on together, would have failed, quote unquote, right? Like, what does failure even mean in the podcasting world? Like, as long as you keep uploading episodes and keep trying, like, that's just how that works, right? But it was another way of like, okay, well, I can share this with somebody else, and then it's not just all on me. But the reality is, my dream is to be the first visibly disabled Oprah or Ellen. That has been my guiding light, my North Star, the thing that has surpassed every other dream of mine. It has been the one thing that I consistently come back to. And if I want to do that, I can't share the spotlight with somebody else. I have to do it myself. I have to do the groundwork. I have to understand how to do interviews. I have to understand how to do research so that I can do interviews. I have to understand how every facet of having a talk show works. Because regardless of what the production studio and production quality is like, the reality is I have already, in some capacity, achieved my dream. Because Access Denied is a talk show. Access Denied is a talk show. I film videos. I have audio. Is it in a studio? No. Is it in my living room? Yeah. Am I using a webcam and a little microphone? Sure am. But is it a talk show? It is. Because I'm sitting here, I'm talking, I have guests on, I interview them, we share stories. It's a talk show. I have achieved a version of my dream. Is it the level of my dream that I want? No. But is it that important stepping stone? 100%. And I think ultimately that is a huge part of the reason that I was so afraid of taking it. It's why I let everything derail me. Getting that close, but not actually being there, and like taking that step and knowing that can I do it? Can I trust myself to do it? Can I actually like make this happen? Is my dream even within reach? Am I going to be good at this? Am I going to be boring? Are people going to listen? Am I going to be successful? All of that was on the table by starting my own podcast. And that is not lost on me. It's not lost on me. It's part of what held me back. And I think it's important to say this. Because I have a talk show right now. It might not be on a production stage. It might not be backed by huge, rich investors. It might just be in my living room with a microphone and a mug and a webcam and hoping for the best. But I have a talk show. I have guests on. I interview them. We tell stories. We laugh. We have a good time. We entertain. We educate. We inform. And it's a talk show. And so, you know, the final thing that I think always, always, always that got in my way throughout all of this was this idea of I need an idea that is so good that it's something that I want to commit to. And when I came up with the idea for Access Denied, everything just fell into place. I think that was ultimately one of the biggest things that was holding me back. I didn't want to just take this big leap into having my own talk show, no matter the level, no matter what it looked like, without having a clear and concise and concrete idea of what I wanted to achieve with it. And I think I finally found that around June of this year. It came while I was abroad. I traveled back to the UK for the first time since everything sort of went down with my divorce last year. And in that, I was returning to this space where I had had one of the biggest rejections of my life, right? My ex asking for a divorce. Huge. Traumatizing. But that trip was so healing for me. And I think in that, I realized like, this is the worst possible rejection that I could have ever imagined. My partner, my husband, asking for a divorce. And I'm back in that space where I experienced all of those feelings. And I was like, rejection, it's part of life. It's part of life. And then, I started thinking about how I'd been rejected my whole life because of my disability and discrimination and being told no and failing. And they're all forms of rejection. They're all forms of being told no. They're all things that hold us back. They're all barriers. But what do we do when we're faced with a barrier? We have to figure out a way around it because life keeps moving. It keeps going. And I knew in that moment that was what I wanted to talk about. And thus Access Denied was born. I can't believe that it is now, like I said, I started this whole thing up in June of 2024, and we are now in December of 2024, so 6 months later. And here we are, 13 episodes into season 1, with season 2 very much in the planning process right now, behind the scenes. I cannot wait to continue this journey with you all. I have had some incredible, incredible people on this podcast sharing so many vulnerable stories and so many powerful nuggets of wisdom. And I just feel so beyond grateful to every single person that's been involved, whether they be a guest, whether it be somebody who I've vented to in my life. Thanks, Mom. About the podcast, whether it be one of you wonderful listeners who has given me a platform in the first place to be able to live out my dream of being a talk show host in some capacity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys mean the world to me. But I also want to say that I am so freaking grateful that I finally got out of my own way and did the damn thing. I did it scared. I did it imperfectly. And now every week I get to have conversations with people where they remind me why it's so important that I got out of my own way. And why it's so important that even though I didn't know what I was doing at the beginning, and in many ways I still don't, I'm still learning. This is still experimenting. I don't know when it will stop being experimenting because I think there's a level of constant experimentation in the content creator space. You have to kind of be willing to adapt and change. And I think that's across many industries as well. You don't want to get stuck in one sort of rut. But I think, doing something imperfectly and learning and changing and adapting and implementing the changes and then being willing to still do those new changes imperfectly and growing and adapting, and the cycle repeats itself, right? Doing things imperfectly is the only way that progress is ever going to be made. It's the only way that you're ever going to achieve anything that somewhat resembles your dreams. You have to start somewhere, and it's not going to be good at first. It's not going to be great. It's good. You have to be able to grow, friends. You have to be able to continue to improve and work on it and do the damn thing and do it scared and challenge yourself in order to get to where you want to go. High school Jess would have never believed that she actually started a talk show. Because again, I wasn't even proud to admit that that was a real dream back then. I felt like a joke. I was like, oh no, that'll never happen. Well, 16-year-old Jess, it happened. It happened, and it wasn't without its challenges, that's for sure, but it did happen. And hopefully this little podcast continues to grow. I'm super excited about season 2. Once again, I have some really, really exciting people that have signed on to be guests on season 2 already. I have an entire roster of names that I'm excited to have on for season 2. Hopefully they say yes. I've not reached out to everybody yet. I am going to take the holiday season to process the numbers, to understand how things performed on Access Denied in this first season. And I'm going to also obviously spend time with family, friends, decompressing from a very heavy fall of work. I always knew that I wanted to do 13 episodes too. Like, I think right after I decided that Access Denied was going to be a podcast about like rejection or whatever, the second thing that I figured out before anything else, right before any other thing, was that I wanted it to be 13 episodes because that's Taylor Swift's number, and Taylor Swift is a mastermind. She has all the luck in the world. I'm pretty sure she might be Mother Nature. She is a queen, and if that's her number of success, maybe it would be mine too. So season 1 was always going to be 13 episodes, and for several reasons, I thought that was digestible. I thought that was easy to work for. It wasn't so short that it didn't even feel like a full season, but it was long enough to get some sort of like understanding of the numbers as well without overwhelming myself, because again, I'm a one-woman show. I do a lot of other things besides just make podcast content. So 13 was going to be my magic number for season 1. I don't know how many episodes season 2 will be. I envision it being longer than 13 episodes. But we'll see. I think I will take most of January to record episodes. Believe it or not, friends, I don't typically record the week that episodes come out. That has been the trajectory for many of these final episodes here that you've listened to. It's been much more quick turnaround sort of vibes. And that's fun. That's more relevant in some ways, but I am somebody who is a planner and I like to have things under my belt a little bit. So I will be working on recording a few episodes at least before the launch of season 2. So probably don't expect a return in January, but I'm thinking February is my goal. So keep an eye out. I will continue to release videos on Instagram and TikTok. I think I got away from that a little bit as things were really picking up with the podcast. So be sure to follow Access Denied Pod on TikTok and Instagram to see little shorts of some of these longer episodes that you've hopefully already listened to. And if you haven't, obviously, all 13 episodes are here and in full and fully ready for you. So if you skipped an episode, or if you've only tuned in for 1 or 2 and you want to pop in for some of the other ones, please check them out. Final little thing, I don't know if you've seen this in my last couple episodes. This is some merch, actually, friends. I am working with a merch company. This is the first rendition. There's going to be a link in the show notes, but also it will be linked on Instagram, TikTok, all of that. You can get this mug. I also have journals with this little logo on it. Whoa. Isn't it cute? It's the chain breaking. It's the A and the D that Access Denied. This is merch that I am selling alongside the podcast. So if you want to sip your tea with me as you listen to the podcast, you now can do so. Tea is a really big part of who I am. I love tea. I have my little tea. It usually just sits here. It's hard to tell with the double screen when I'm doing my interview videos, but I always have the tea. Sometimes it makes an appearance. And I was so excited to get this mug a few weeks ago after working with this company for a while and designing this together. But it's really special to me. This is my first bit of merch that I've ever sold. And I don't want this to be a huge ad. Like, you can buy it or you don't. You can buy it if you want. You don't have to. Or it's not that serious. But I'm really proud of it. I'm really excited to have a little piece, like a little personal thing to commemorate season 1 with. I don't know if this is always going to be around or not. I have some exciting ideas for merch in the future, but I think that this is a great little stepping stone and something that I'm really proud of and really excited by. So if you want to sip your tea with me while you listen to Access Denied, feel free to go check this out. Again, I know I have journals. That was an important one for me. A lot of this podcast is about like goal setting. It's about following your dreams. And I wanted a place where people could write down their goals, write down their dreams, and write down their fears. And similarly, I think Autumn Breon is the one that said this, but like vocalizing your fears takes away their power in a way. And so similarly, like writing it down and like helping you like see like, oh, well, if that's the worst that can happen, then at least I'm prepared for it. And so I don't know. So journals, mugs, and so much excitement. If this is your first time listening, this is not what most episodes are like. So I hate to break it to you. Who knows? Maybe I'll do more solo episodes in the future. If you guys do like this, do let me know your thoughts and feelings, of course, as always, in the comments or whatnot. I don't think I say that typically in my outro, but you can comment on Spotify. You can comment on YouTube, where this is posted on both. So there's that. Be sure to subscribe on both. And if you've not done so, it really, 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 really does help in the rankings if you rate the podcast in any sort of capacity. I don't think you can do that on YouTube. You can like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, but on Spotify and Apple Podcasts specifically, I know you can rate, you can leave a review. All of those things help in the podcasting world. So if you want to go ahead and do that for me, that would be a really special gift that you can give me for the completion of season 1, a holiday gift, if you will. I just had a birthday. It can be my birthday gift. I don't know. Just, it would mean a lot to me if you would review, rate this podcast, all of these things. But yeah, y'all, this has meant the world to me. Thank you for joining me on this journey. We're just getting started. I cannot wait for season 2, season 3, season 4, all the seasons that are yet to come. And thanks for being here with me today. Thanks for being here with me throughout this first season. And I will see you in 2025 for more Access Denied. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Access Denied. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so I hope that you will subscribe, download, whatever you do to make sure you're here every single week. We have so many incredible guests coming on, and I want to say a huge shout out to JP Warner Sound for dropping this sick beat that you're listening to right now. Thanks to everybody who made Access Denied possible, and I will see you next time. Bye!